Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Comics Deli Morte, episode 101. Awesome stuff. Now past the 100s, and we got a new guest on the show, Brian J. Lambert, Wingless Comics. How you doing?
How you
And
doing? Hey,
tell a little bit.
I want to say congratulations
Yeah,
real
go
quick,
ahead.
man. Before any of the cool stuff, congratulations, because a lot of shows, one, don't make it past 10 episodes. It's certainly not 100,
Yeah,
man. So congrats on that.
yeah.
That's like a
I
big
mean,
feat that people really don't acknowledge. But I want to make sure
oh, I
you guys
appreciate
know
it.
that's
Yeah,
pretty damn awesome.
sometimes me and Jason, we can't be on every week, due to my health or his work and him taking care of the family. But, we try to come on and, you know, represent comics, horrors, and everything that people love. And we get to meet new people like you. And y from what I've seen from the work, I don't know if you do the artwork, but just the storyline really piques my interest.
Awesome. Yeah, and you know
So,
what? I'm actually really fortunate as far as like the artist goes because I'm 100% not.
mhm,
I step in and I do some coloring every so often just because I like learning that craft. But
yeah.
Fabio Samao is the series artist. Issue one was done by Gleitson Robiero, but the
Mhm,
rest has been Fabio, and it's just he matches the tone and the scope, and he's a huge fan of like Michael Turner and
yeah.
the image stuff and
Mhm.
those guys that I really take a lot of inspiration from as well. So I've been very very lucky, and Nestor Rajula has been my colorist since I started.
Mhm.
So that's also been pretty awesome too, right? To have like a team where we've done five, six, 7 issues together, which is also rare in indie comics, and be able to just continue like kind of grow and get to know each other and learn each other, so
Yeah.
that we can put out this product that we all kind of love.
Yeah, I mean, we've had people on the show before who've done like 3 issues together or so on, but it's just really great to have that chemistry because at least you guys know what your strengths and weaknesses are. So it's like, okay, if you're doing the writing, it's like, okay, now I could write this crazy scene that's going on, and I know it could get drawn because I know these person's skills and what makes them really shine.
Yeah, with Fabio, excuse me, it wasn't until issue we had done issue one of just no issue two of Justice, and we were doing
Mhm.
issue like two of Nightfall, the crossover he also drew for Wingless Comics. And when he was doing that, he had commented to me. He was like, "Thank you," because like he was like, I had to learn like new words. Obviously, English is his second language.
Yeah.
He's from Brazil, so Portuguese. And I hadn't thought of it, right? Like I was just writing a script the way I would just normally write and read one. And what
Mhm.
I had to do, which actually was very beneficial for me as well, was like I had to go back and pare down some of the words, right? Like not use. It's not that I have to. It just makes it easier. It's not that he didn't understand, but it made it easier when I wasn't so high value language in terms of saying things and describing things, right? I wasn't. I was using like novel descriptors as opposed to how you would describe something to somebody if you're just speaking to them. And that
Oh,
helped
yeah,
me a lot
for
in terms
for
of like,
sure.
oh man, let me just say it like I would be speaking it to him. And again, that helped our communication and stuff, which was really, really dope. I
Mhm.
still throw in a curveball every now and then just to give him something to struggle with because the guy is flawless and effortless in all the art he does, in my opinion. So, I'm gonna make him struggle with something.
Alright. We'll definitely get into that. Well, we'll start from the beginning. Like, when did you really knew that you wanna do something creative? Like, at what age? And when did you really start? I was like, "Okay, I wanna do this more than just a hobby."
I've always really, really wanted to do creative stuff and even comics themselves. Like even as a kid, I feel like most of us go through that phase where we're like, oh, I'm going to make a bunch of superheroes and I'm going to do all these things because they seem really cool when we're young.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
Obviously, we're just copying everything we saw, but at the time, but we all just wanted to do it. So as a kid, I wanted to, and I was really into art, and all through high school, I always bring up Image Comics because Image Comics was really, really big in
Oh,
terms of
yeah,
my
for sure.
formative years and how they broke off and what they did and the imagery there. I
Mhm.
love that '90s X-Men run. Obviously with Jim Lee on there, I'm a huge Jim Lee fan,
Yeah.
and so I just continued that. But as I got older and my high school football career didn't lead to the pros,
Mhm.
uh, I realized like I needed to do something else. And so in school and in college, I kind of got away from art and got more into the writing aspect of it.
Mhm.
And you know, time just kind of went on, only because at the time I graduated and at the time I was in college, there wasn't as clear a path to like independent comics or comics in general.
Yeah.
I remember there's a story like the Wachowskis pitched a comic to Marvel right when they were like 18. I don't know how they did it to this day, right? I don't know how they got that meeting. I don't know how they were able to just send anything to them because it wasn't
Mhm.
like now. It wasn't there wasn't Google. Everybody didn't have an email address where you could send a pitch or whatever else. So it was just much different in terms of accessing that stuff. And it wasn't until obviously later on in life, after I self-published my first novel, that I really saw an inroad into comics and like the viability of being able to do it.
Yeah.
It wasn't just like a dream anymore. I could actually physically do it and link up with an artist and link up with the letterer and link up with the colorist. And, all those little things that go into making comics that
Mhm.
take time and effort that you may not know if you're not in comics already.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
That's
so the journey was, like a lot of us, it was a fairly long journey, but one that was kind of crystallized in my mind
Mhm.
from childhood. I always wanted to tell some stories or do some fantasy or something. I just didn't know how until recently, relatively anyway.
Yeah. And definitely, because I do everything myself, the artwork and the writing, but when you were transitioning from the novel to the comics, how big of a difficult was it for you? It's like, "Okay, I gotta add not so much dialogue, so that way it doesn't take away from the actual imagery of the artwork."
You know what was actually more difficult than that part? Because I feel through the editing process, if you are wise about the editing process, the dialogue
Mhm.
takes care of itself.
Yeah.
Um, what was more difficult actually was description. You don't have to say how hot it felt. Like you don't have to say, "Oh, the room felt hot, like a sweltering blah blah blah," right? Like a
Mhm.
sauna in the middle of summer. You don't have to say that. It's a sauna. Like that's all you have to
Yeah.
say. The room was hot. Like so, then the artist one knows how to draw it, and then your colorer knows how to bring up the reds.
Mhm.
So taking out a lot of the descriptive language was initially a little bit difficult. And as I edit for other people, I see that a lot of times where they are. It's not a description of the room, but it's like the poetry behind the description, going from novel writing to comic writing that people, myself included, struggle with.
Yeah.
So that part was probably my biggest hurdle. Dialogue, I feel like a lot of novels actually don't have enough dialogue
Mhm.
because a lot of times you're living in the character's brain directly. So you're like viewing it through them. They'll say, Brian saw such and such over to his left, and it's describing how the character reacts to that, the smells, the sights, the sounds. But when you get to dialogue, it's, three or four lines between characters, and you're back in the main character's mind. So when writing dialogue for comics, I feel like it was a little bit easier because I could have that mini back and forth,
Yeah.
and
Gotcha.
get right to it as opposed to saying somebody was going to say something. They can just say it, and it can be very choppy, like real actual languages, like a real conversation is. So I thought
Mhm.
that was for me that was like a little bit easier. I love that part of it.
Awesome, yeah. So you were talking about, you did artwork, like, with any of your projects, do you do any of the coloring or anything like that?
So we're currently running Justice Number Four, and in the
Mhm.
Justice Number Four campaign, I did the coloring for the cover of Justice Number Four. There are some pinups that we are going to add as stretch goals, and I've colored two of those, and, in little pieces here and there. I'm more of a pinup guy than I am a panel or page person. I've done pages and panels. It's just not really
Gotcha.
my thing. Uh, but yeah, I've done a little bit of the art, occasionally here and there because I find it to be incredibly fun. I find it to be incredibly
Mhm.
engaging and also something that actually allows me to kind of um, like you can zone out on coloring. You don't have to continue thinking about it,
Yeah.
which is for me
Mhm.
a really really cool piece of it because then I can just kind of turn my brain off just a little bit.
Well, that's what I love about comics so much. If you're not like a greatest, like, penciler or inker, there's always a job for some type of artistic still. So if you can even, like, do just that and you just know how to work with colors, you could have a good job in, the whole comic book
Mhm.
community in the, industry.
Yeah, yeah.
Or
Even as far as
even
splatters,
if you
you know.
can't do artwork and you're a letterer, people need letterers.
Yeah, yeah. There's always something to do, and I think that when people are outside of the industry, they don't understand how kind of expansive the industry itself is. The
Mhm,
industry itself is very expansive, like you said, in terms of being able to write, being able to edit, being able to letter, being able to color, being able to ink, being able to flat. There's so many elements that go into making comics. I mean, someone like yourself who does all the art and all the writing, that's a little bit different, but you're wearing seven
yeah.
hats, though, you know?
Yeah,
um, because
exactly.
so I think it's one of those things that is a very open field. Again, as long as you kind of know, or as long as you dive in, right? As long as you find out and research comics itself, it's a very open field, and there's so much you can do
Mhm,
within it.
for sure. And I really love this cover, by the way. I don't know who, did the colors on that, but that's really awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, that's me and Fabio Samao there, um, with with a couple of Adobe tricks and on and on and on.
Yeah.
Um, I had a really good friend. I had done one version of this cover, but I had a really good friend, Jason Reeves of 133 Art, who also does our printing, is also live on a campaign right now for Changam the Jade Obelisk #3. He hit me up and he gave me some tips. He's a very amazing artist himself. He gave me some tips on like, hey man, you should, have you thought about this or that? And it got the look that I wanted. I wanted justice to feel on fire. I wanted
Mhm,
it to feel tormented, and he really helped me bring that out.
awesome. And with your artists and everything, where did you, find them? Did you go through, like, a w Facebook website or anything like that to really look for these? Because different people nowadays with Discord, people could find artists through there, so I don't know where you found your artist.
I actually got really lucky, and it was Facebook.
Okay.
Facebook and Instagram. So originally, Nestor he worked with another company I was working with, and we just had a very good relationship. I liked the way he colored the character. And
Mhm,
Gladson I found on Instagram because he followed the Wingless Comics page and kind of back and forth. And I liked his art, and it was really, really cool. And after we finished issue 1, I was looking to do issue 2, and I was actually gonna, Glayton and I were gonna link back up for issue 2, but I stumbled on Fabio Samao, his artwork, like in the middle of the night at random on a Facebook post. And I hit
mhm.
him up immediately, and I was like, "Hey, man, could you do a pinup for me or two?" And we were talking, and like from that moment, we were kind of off to the races. He really just embodies exactly the look I wanted for Justice. Gladson's art was amazing and I loved it. Fabio comes more in line with, again, like the Michael Turner kind of Aspen Comics, style that I wanted. Um,
Gotcha.
and so once he drew Justice 1 or 2 times, and again, we had a couple conversations, he knew precisely what I wanted. And it just worked out just amazingly from that point forward.
Oh, yeah, the artwork, especially this one where he's facing against, like, you know, the three-headed, dog, and yeah, just even the building is really nice pencil work, and just the way the pages are broke up, really, really creative, and I love the way that you don't need much dialogue to see what the action is going on there.
Yeah, so I really want it to be for issue 4, which is the climax of this first story arc. I really wanted it to
Mhm.
kind of tell not necessarily the origin, right? But the origin of some of these relationships. That was really, really important to me, in getting that
Okay,
piece of it
gotcha.
done. So we needed to be kind of expansive because we're talking about creatures that are long lived. We're talking about immortals. We're talking about angels. And so we're really diving into the meat and potatoes of
Mhm.
who and what they are, as well as having it underscored by this huge, fight, by this huge battle. So I wanted to make sure that, like Hong Kong cinema is very good about stepping back and doing
Oh,
a
yeah,
lot of
for
wide
sure.
shots and having your camera pulled back so you can see everything that's happening. Whereas America cinema is a lot of times it's very punched in, it's very choppy cuts. No, I wanted this very cinematic kind of view of like saying it's a way to say that things are a lot bigger than what you're seeing here. There's more
Yeah,
to it, and it's
exactly.
got to be
If you want
expansive.
some inspiration for a comic book, like for a fighting, like fighting pages or anything, like you were saying, the Hong Kong cinema does it really well, and
Yeah.
you know, learn from that.
Yeah. And I've seen it a lot in maybe like Nightwing comic books, right? Like
Oh yeah,
more than
Nightwing.
anything,
Yeah.
the way they lay out the panels in his fight scenes, how it'll be a full, like a splash page basically,
Hmm.
but it's this long, winding fight. And I think that that is sometimes a better mechanic for storytelling, especially when you're getting into these, like you said, like these large fights.
Yeah.
Punching stuff in doesn't really make sense to me,
Or not
and I
even.
don't even like it with American cinema. So I
Mhm.
definitely don't want to do it with comics.
Yeah, because not even with, like, fighting, but, like, with the Nightwing, like, there was a page that I really loved where it had, like, f in the one page, it had 4 drawings of him, but it was showing him from afar doing a front flip, landing here, doing another front
Yeah.
flip, doing a back flip, where it's actually showing him getting closer to the page
Hmm.
just by doing a lot of action. And,
Hmm.
yeah, that's what's really important. You can't just have a bunch of floating heads just talking, especially when it comes to comics like this. You need to make the action stick out and really draw the person's eyes. I mean, to what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very I feel like it's a again, comics are one of those things that's a lot more nuanced than people kind of take it for sometimes.
Hmm.
But I feel like it's very important to realize that nuance, and I think that that leads to better storytelling. Like I said,
Oh
I
yeah,
love the image stuff out the '90s, right? But at the same time, if we really go back and we're very just if we're realistic about it, the storytelling wasn't all that great.
yeah, exactly.
And it missed out on a lot of that. It had a lot of action set pieces and a lot of beautiful art, but the
Hmm.
storytelling kind of missed the mark. And so that's something that I try to stay very aware of, right? I don't want to miss the mark in terms of telling this story while having these grand art pieces as well.
And that's the problem with a lot of like the mainstream comics nowadays that they're just focusing on the art, and some of the stories have a hit and miss. That's why they're always rebooting the universe.
Exactly.
It's like
Exactly.
the new 52 of DC. We got to get rid of that now and go somewhere else.
Yeah, which I'm super glad. Okay, so I'm not really happy they're. No, excuse me. I'm happy that they're doing it. I'm kind of
Hmm.
unhappy that the new 52 ever happened. Like I
Yeah.
was never a new 52 fan. Don't get me- I like again. I love Jim Lee's art. I didn't
Hmm.
like the new 52. Like, hey, we're gonna update everybody. Well, except for Green Lantern and except for Flash. Oh, and
Yeah.
nobody likes the new Superman, so we're gonna bring the old one back, but we're still new 52. I just didn't
Hmm.
like that entire. It just didn't make sense to me. I wasn't a fan.
Yeah. Exactly. Now, for anybody that doesn't know, like from the description that I have on Instagram and stuff like that, go in a little bit more about justice and how you came up with this idea and the whole the origin and the story of what's going on.
So justice is actually born out of something actually I saw in horror movies, right? Like I was watching, I think I was watching The Ring, but I was watching the American version of The Ring, not
Okay,
the
yeah.
Japanese version, right? And I got really, really angry. I don't like when supernatural stories have there's no way to win. I don't like unfair stories, right? Like
Gotcha.
so even when they broke, quote unquote broke the tape and did the this and did the that and cleansed, like the curse still remained. I didn't like that. And I've never
Mhm.
liked where you have things like The Conjuring or whatever else, where your quote unquote hero is always begging somebody to like when they if they'll call on God, right? If that's the
Yeah.
the way that they win or whatever. It's always like pleading and begging and like, could you just do me this favor just this one time? And it's that's so lame to me. Um,
Well, not just that, but, it gets predictable.
yeah. So I've never liked that part, right? So I like things like, let's say, the prophecy, where we're talking about, oh man, this is this crazy war that's been
Mhm.
going on between angels and demons and Nephilim and blah 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 for years and years and years, right? Millennia. And so in my mind, I was like, well, if it's a war, then that means there are warriors, right? Like that means there have got to be warriors on both sides. One
Mhm.
side doesn't get to be badass and the other side not. And so I'm a very yin and yang type of person. And while I have um, a religious background, like my family is, I come from like a religious family.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily that, but it's
Mhm.
a mythology, as I call it, a Christian mythology that I know fairly well. So they always say, write what you know. And like I said, I know it fairly well and I know what I want to do with it. So I thought it would be dope to have this badass angel that's been fighting for millennia, not unlike, your hellspawn that's been fighting for millennia, not unlike your demon that's again in the Conjuring or whatever that's been fighting for millennia. Um, just be an actual character, and it gives me the chance to explore a lot of things, to explore a lot of questions,
Oh,
and to
yeah.
be kind of a fish out of water, right? Like this
Mhm.
is a person who, if I use the Dante's Inferno, allegory, Dante goes into hell and he's got to go through hell and
Mhm.
come back up or whatever. So I was like, well, if an angel comes down to earth, isn't that like hell to him? Like they go from paradise to like a place of questions and answers and shifting loyalties and all these other things. So the idea of justice just got born out of questions I had and wanting to use a mythology and a historical context that a lot of people know.
Yeah,
So
there's nothing wrong with that, m I have a supernatural that's about demons and angels and all that stuff, and just like with a lot of indie comic creators out there now that have a bunch of different zombie stories, you
mhm.
could have so many people write about angels and demons, and it's not gonna get tiresome because there's always a new twist you could add onto that.
Exactly, exactly. It really is like one of those things where, I mean, the quote is like, "There's nothing new under the sun," or "No new
Mhm.
story can be told," right? Because I mean, the story of ABC is done, but how you do that
Yeah,
is where the real gold comes from. So, I
exactly.
mean, with that, I wanted to tell a story that was kind of, again, kind of far-reaching, but could lead into a bunch of other things. So, justice in issue one, justice comes down because uh, God, the being, the supreme being in our universe,
Mhm.
speaks through proxies all the time. Again, if we go off of a religious historical context, in the Bible, in the Quran, in everything, uh, in the Torah, he like speaks through the burning bush, or you know what I mean. There's
Yeah.
always like a proxy. So basically, in our universe, the voice of God is missing. Like his proxy is missing. So
Yeah,
justice
because you had
being
the
an
messenger
archangel,
of God. The messenger of God was like an angel, it wasn't God himself,
exactly.
because your voice could you could die if you heard God's voice, so
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly the point. Kind
Mhm.
of like God, what's the name of the movie? Kevin Smith. Um, Geez, I cannot pull it up right now.
Dogma?
Dogma. Yeah, Dogma. Yeah, exactly. Just like kind of like
Yep.
Dogma.
Mhm.
So Justice comes down. He's an archangel, and and he comes down to find the voice of God. And in his search, in his trial, in his time of doing that, like he just finds a lot of things out. Right. Again, this is a person who's never been exposed in this sense to the world, right? Has he been on
Yeah.
the world before? Yeah, but most of the time it's demon hunting, fighting, war, blah blah blah. He's exposed to this one thing. Now he's
Mhm.
exposed to the world and has to kind of function in it. And it's that journey where we get to see how he discovers things, how he discovers that everything that he thought when he was in heaven isn't necessarily true. Um,
Mhm.
and how everything that he was told isn't necessarily true. He runs in the first issue. He runs afoul of vampires who we call children of the night in our universe, and he finds Billy, and he's got to save her, um, and then he gets attacked. Like vampires break an ancient pact with a another being of extreme power and extreme age, who is still yet mysterious in our universe. And again, it's just his journey to try to reconcile what he thought he knew, reconcile trying to save the voice of God, and running afoul of Judas Iscariot, who is the Lord of all of the children of the night. Dracula, he takes up that space in our world, and also running into conflict with Cain, a man who he banished after the first murder. So it's a very like layered and nuanced story again that's rife with the mythology that Christianity has proposed through its various, media, the
S
Bible, et cetera, et cetera.
and see, that's got me hooked on, just all those multi layers of, like, all those different characters, you got me sold.
I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it. I think that so I've had people ask me questions, right, or ask me if it's a faith based book or different things. And I've had to explain that, like, once upon a time, Norse mythology, which we call it now, was a religion, right?
Mhm.
People believed in Thor. People
Yeah,
believed
exactly.
in Fenrir, like all these different things. Same for Greek, same for Egyptian, same for all of these around the world.
Mhm.
And so I take that same stance with Christianity in terms of this comic book. It's not a faith-based comic book. I'm using a character, right, of my own invention, um, in a context of heroism, in a context of searching, in a context of storytelling and fantasy.
Yeah.
And I think that you can do that if you take the time. You can do it respectfully, and you can
Mhm.
do it in a way that doesn't insult anyone, because it's about telling a story and creating these myths of our own. And that's basically what justice is, and how I deal with it on a mental level and on a storytelling level. But again, the Bible, if we take the Bible as a book, it is rife with imagery. It's rife with stories. It's a treasure trove of things you can mine in order to tell other stories.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Most definitely. And there's just so many ways to explore too, or ways that things could be explained.
Yeah,
And yeah, just go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, it was a thing, and I mean, obviously, I use it myself, right? But before Dracula 2000, having Judas Iscariot as Dracula, like, I had never thought of it. But I
Yeah, but
remember
that
when
was
Dracula
amazing though.
2000 came out, and I was like, "Oh my god, that's so dope! It's such a great
Yeah,
idea."
that's amazing idea. And it
Yeah,
kinda
so
links it to the Bible because why would Dracula be, you know, to all these different things, to sunlight, to silver, and yeah, it's just really great concept.
yeah, yeah. So I again, I loved it, and it was something that I wanted to kind of jump off myself because I just
Mhm.
thought it was super cool, And then
Yeah,
there's the other end of the mythology, which obviously we use, where Cain is the first werewolf, right? Because the mark of Cain turns him into a beast. It turns him into a werewolf.
very
Um,
wicked.
I just thought that was amazing as well. So that was something that I wanted to kind of explore in my own way and explore what would happen if those two met, right? Like, what
Mhm.
do these guys feel? How do they feel about what's happened to them? I don't like, well, I don't want to say I don't like, I just, from a storytelling aspect, I don't buy the super repentive versions of them, right? I like
Yeah.
them being bitter. I like them being hurt. I like them being very flawed humans.
Mhm.
Um, and that doesn't mean that they're 100% redeemable at that point, because I'm not one of those guys. It's like every villain can be redeemed, but I like being able to say, like, well, it makes sense for him. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
hey, I may not do it. I may not become a vampire and turn everybody else into vampires, but if I was in his position, I might just understand it.
Mhm.
You know, and so that was again, that's something that's very important to me. And again, just opening up all of that lore, opening up all of these aspects of and avenues of storytelling.
Yeah. At first, did you feel like you were overwhelmed? Because with a lot of comic book creators, so like, "Oh, I wanna have this big universe where these type of people and those type of peoples." Was it, like, difficult at first to not to add so much in the beginning, or was like, "Okay, I gotta I could easily not, tell these type of, like, vampires or whatever until, like, this issue, because I know overall what the story arc is gonna be and who's important at that time."
For me specifically, it wasn't very difficult, only because I
Mhm.
hate that. I ran into so many creators when I first started, especially like artists. That when I first started, I was trying to collaborate with people like a lot of writers do, or kind of figure some things out. And a lot of artists that I ran into, and even creators and writers themselves, would always the first one of the first things they would always say is, "Oh, I've got a million characters. Oh, I've got so many characters." If you're writing for somebody and you're like, "Oh, hey, I got an idea. We could take the story this way," and they're like, "Oh, I got a character for that. I got such a character, and I got so many. I got hundreds. We could do all of this." It always annoyed me. It just bugged me to
Mhm.
no end, because I think about Marvel. Marvel took 70, 80, 90, 100 years, right? Like, to build up these characters and to
Oh,
have
yeah.
such a huge universe, and on and on and on. So when I went into writing Justice, I made sure that I stuck with the topic. Um, Justice started itself as like short stories. It was an unnamed angel, um, and even dealing with Judas, it was the first iteration of that was a literal meeting. Like Justice sits down to have dinner with Judas.
Yeah.
In my mind, right? Because they're friends, they're acquaintances at the very least, right? They're people that talk to each other. Justice knows so much about him. He knows so much about Justice. They've known each other for thousands of years at this point.
Mhm.
Whether or not like they get along, they've just known each other. So it was very easy to say like, I want this main character to do this, and not think about, wait, is he a shiny vampire? Is he a dark vampire? Is this Vampire the Masquerade? Is all these? I don't need to think about all those other things,
Yeah.
um, because I can let the reader wonder that. I can let the reader ponder that. I'm introducing this idea and this one story, and the reader can ponder, you know, how many, there are 12, the 12 tribes, I call them the 12 tribes of Cain and the three broods of night, right? Like, so I can let the reader decide, for the moment at least, what's the difference in the three tribes. I can let the reader decide what's the difference in the 12 without having to get into that and kind of break all of that down and get bogged down in that story, in that element of it, because that's not necessarily storytelling.
Yeah.
I'd rather create this tapestry like in the Tolkien way, even though Tolkien did like a lot more work and he did structure a lot of things, but he left a lot of things open so that
Mhm.
people could kind of interpret it themselves and make these little connections that may or may not have been there. I kind of like um, that stringent headcanon thing. I think is somewhat damaging to storytelling.
Gotcha. Yeah.
It's like the case of like the Gray Jedi, right? People argue over whether Gray Jedi still exists now, or are they canon, or should they have been
Mhm.
canon because of the books, and on and on and on. I don't want to do that. I'd rather have people always kind of talk about Gray Jedi, right? Always
Yeah.
have that in their mind and be like, oh, that would be a cool idea, or if it happens, it's cool, as opposed to either negating or agreeing that it's a thing and then having to create stat blocks and whatever for it.
Mhm. Very awesome stuff. So with Justice, I see that you wrote other ones. So did you start Wingless Comics, or how did that company come about?
Yeah, yeah. Wingless Comics is my baby. I've had Wingless Entertainment since before I published my first novel in 2017. And I originally started my comic book journey with a company called Concrete Comics. And again, they're a bunch of great guys. They've won awards, done all these things. And I kind of started with them. After about a year, I broke off from Concrete Comics because I wanted to do my own thing. I wanted to be my own person, for lack of better words. And so I started Wingless Comics as a division of Wingless Entertainment, so I could do that, so I could tell my own story, so that I could branch off my own world in the way I wanted to see it. So
Mhm.
I started. I'd already released Justice Zero. We did a little bit of a remix to that, changed a few things, and I brought Malachi Bailey, who writes her for Wingless Comics. I brought him on board because I had read his novel and we had been talking, over the internet and over Facebook. And I just thought he had a really good mind and a really good eye for visual spectacle. So I wanted
Gotcha.
her to be part of the overall group. And we slowly added more pieces. We added Brett Hillisham of Indie Comics Dispatch, and that's where I met your co-host. We've been on a bunch of shows together and talking comics and horror and writing and all kinds of stuff. And so, um, we brought Brett on, and Brett is doing historical fiction called Immortalis for us. We also added two other ones that will debut later on this year. We've added Avery the Astonishing in a co-publishing deal with Constant Hustle
Mhm.
Comics, and that will happen. We'll drop that before the end of the year. And we also added Scarlet Knight, Defender of the Block from 2329 Studios, um, in order to kind of round out for the moment our team and the universe that we want to build, kind of backed by those five, six characters.
What's up, Gary? So, yeah, that was definitely the next thing I wanted to get into. I seen that you had the Wingverse, so all these, like, different books, like Nightfall and all that stuff, are they linked to Justice,
Yes.
like, in that universe?
Nightfall itself is a crossover between Wingless Comics, Constant Hustle Comics, and Concept Moon Studios, and it brings our principal heroes together. So you'll be able to see Justice, you'll be able to see Caliburn, you'll be able to see Avery the Astonishing, Lux, Her, Prime, and Sakari as our main cast of this book, and that one is basically your larger than life, big popcorn kind of crossover where our heroes come together because they are trying to stop the end of the world. An ancient society is trying to resurrect the serpent god Apep and basically
Very
destroy the
awesome.
world. So obviously they come together to stop
Love
that.
this motorcycle, by the way. I don't know who came up with that slick design, but that's pretty sweet.
Thank you, thank you. That is who is that one? Hmm. It wasn't me, so I can't take credit for it.
Yeah, gotcha.
But I don't remember what artist that was. I'll be honest with you right now.
It does have your name on that, though.
So that's just me as the writer.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, for that's me as the writer creator. And I know that Nestor did interiors on that one. Um, Gosh, I don't remember who did that cover. That's a shame. I should actually, and I feel bad, and I'm sorry. Um, oh, Bruno Lima. Haha. Just took me a second. So Bruno Lima, actually, I sent him some reference, but obviously the bike itself,
Mhm,
I gave him the layout for the cover, but the bike itself and those little aspects are it's all Bruno Lima.
gotcha. Man,
Yeah.
that's
So
go
what
go
we
ahead.
see in
Sorry.
Justice 1 through
Mhm,
5, we haven't released 5 yet, but Justice 1 through 5 comes pre Nightfall, as does Immortalis, but Immortalis is in the recent past. Then Nightfall happens, and then it's not necessarily a relaunch, but modern comics, like mainstream comics, would call it a relaunch. But then that's when we launch everybody else's titles. So Justice number 6 is post Nightfall. Her number 1 is post Nightfall. Scarlet Knight is post Nightfall. Avery the
mhm.
Astonishing is post Nightfall. Nightfall is obviously like a benchmark for different things happening in the overall world, right? When you introduce spectacle to the world, which an angel and all these other things is some form of spectacle, I feel like having a benchmark is important. The world that we've created in the Wingverse, stemming out of the story told in Immortalis, which is the fall of Rome, basically is that the world darkens at that point, right? After Rome, the last Roman outpost falls, demons, vampires, werewolves, all these things that we have known in mythology and we know actually roam the earth freely, and people are aware of them. It's not a secret. So that's why when we come into Justice number 1 and there are just vampires, randomly on the street, it's not a secret. It's something that's known. It's something that people have had to kind of contend with. And in a post Nightfall world, this is the yin to the darkness's yang, right? Like this is heroes rising is the opposition to what we have seen in the Wingverse of darkness having taken hold for 1,000 years.
Yeah. And I know me personally, when, I get into the supernatural with all these different vampires and other fictional characters, you just you probably do too. It's like it's just fun to learn that, like, actual mythology and actual real, like, myths in different countries of what people think of, like, this certain creature, because everybody has a Bigfoot. Everybody has, like, some, version of vampires, and it's just cool to really get down and learn about all that, mythology and find ways to put, like, real facts in there, but twist it around where it's like your own version as well.
Mhm.
So to
I
me, that's
also
always fun to do.
It's also really cool to learn about other cultures and other mythologies because you see how similar all of them are, right? Like
Exactly.
every ancient mythology has a story of a flood, right? Like a great flood that destroys the entire world. So like
And
to
that's why
me
you
that
could,
leads me to
like, make a
believe,
way, because the Tower of Babel, everybody
right,
had,
exactly.
you could
Yes.
really, because everybody had the same language until
Yeah.
everybody's language changed after that. So yeah, like
So I
I think even in Chinese, like, lettering. Like
Hmm.
certain words means like boat, some words mean like 8 people,
Hmm.
and it's like 8 people was on the boat, Noah's
Hmm.
boat. So, yeah,
Yeah.
it's just really fascinating when you start learning about different cultures and
Hmm.
what they believe in and find out how similar it is to each other.
Exactly. And I feel like when you can make those links, like one for yourself, but when you can make those links in storytelling and they
Mhm.
be like real links, right? Like you're taking things from the real world and bring them into that. I think it leads credence to your story. It gives depth to your story, and a little bit of drama to your story as well, which is good. Like it leads it to feel more true and to seem more true and to seem more grounded. Um, so that you're not just plucking things out of the sky and just,
Yeah.
oh hey, we're introducing this random idea and giving you this random idea, hey, accept it. It feels more, it just feels, it has a more depth and more energy to it, so I love that aspect of it as well.
Yeah, it makes the universe seem more, like, expanded instead of just this small little city or island where you have everything. And different readers of those, different backgrounds could relate to that.
Mhm. Even like, so if you look at mainstream, even when, building the multiverse, right? There are a lot of concepts that you have to introduce there, but a lot of it is scientific at this point. But when
Yep.
you do something like, you have the Green Lanterns, that's all created mythology, right? Like they had to take time and do that. And look how many years it was before they introduced the rings along the entire spectrum or introduced the Black Book,
Oh,
and
yeah.
on and on and
Mhm.
on. There are just so many things 'cause there's so much we still don't know about like space and if aliens exist, which, I mean, why wouldn't they? Who knows? And on and on and on, all these other things that we just have no knowledge of. So it's a little bit more difficult to bring those concepts into stories. It takes
Mhm.
a lot longer to do that.
Oh, yeah, for
Or
sure.
conversely, as an indie, you have to start there. You have to say, hey, this is the galaxy. You have to do this is a galaxy a long, long time ago and far, far away. You have to give people that, because if you're mixing like Earth and that, it's just very difficult to make it jive.
Mhm. Very cool. You have anything else you wanna talk more about your comics before we get into, like, the questions?
Uh, my comics are really awesome. Everybody go and
Yeah.
support them. No,
Yeah.
but I mean, I actually do mean that. But again, it's a very nuanced way of storytelling, but it's a visual spectacle, and I love saying that. Issue 4 is wall to wall action because all roads lead to this point as far as the story goes. In issue 1, like I said, you see Justice have to contend with vampires. In issue 2, you see Justice have to contend with werewolves. In issue 3, you see Justice searching for answers to both. And in issue 4, you find out why he's had to contend with both, and what's going to come of it. And uh, there is a term that I've coined, the Lord under the firmament, to mean someone who is untouchable by heaven and hell.
Mhm.
And you get to see why both Cain and Judas would want to be the Lord under the firmament and what that would mean for the greater world if they are capable of doing it, which is very likely. We don't know if
Yeah.
Justice is going to be able to overcome this or he's going to be another pawn and another person just battling against it after the fact. So it's a very, very kind of deep lore based visual spectacle. And I'm super glad and super proud to be at issue 4 and being able to
Yeah,
kind of tie this story
congratulations.
up. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, that's some awesome stuff. Anybody, Gary or anybody who's watching this live or afterwards, the link is in the description to the Kickstarter. Show support, show love. You got about what, 30 more days?
Yeah, yeah. This is a longer campaign than we normally do. We usually
Mhm.
only do 30 days, but we did about, I think, 40 this time.
Oh, very
To
cool.
kind of, we wanted to kind of spread it out a little bit more to give ourselves some time to breathe and give ourselves some time to kind of focus on getting everything right. And I think that's very important. I think the care that we take with these books is very important, um, and so we want to make sure we did that.
Yeah, because that's definitely number one. I mean, if you expect people to come back for more, you have to make sure that your products are in top shape when it comes to printing or anything like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. So yeah, so you're new to the show. So besides talking about your Kickstarter and everything, we like to just ask the creators, what like their favorite horror movies or stuff like that because as an audience, we want to get to know the creator instead of just buying something because, that's how we really grow as a community by building friendships and stuff like that. And sometimes when you're at cons, I don't know if you ever done a con, if you act friendly to people instead of just a salesman, they're willing to buy stuff majority of the time.
Yeah, yeah. I 100% agree. Cons, I love cons. Are I feel like for every creator, they got to be a love hate, right? Because
Mhm.
you are there, and it's a tiring day, but you can't look tired. You know what I mean? Like you've got to be pumped up. But then at the same token, you are right when you start talking to somebody and they're interested in your book or they're interested. You guys start talking about I don't know, Goku or whatever else, right? Whatever the
Mhm.
thing is, it's just invigorating, and I feel like a child again. So I
Yeah.
love cons and I hate cons and I love
Yeah.
them.
Awesome.
But my
So
favorite, so horror. Oh man, so there are a couple that I really really love. Um,
oh, wait, someone
any cons this summer? So I plan on. Okay, so I'm on the West Coast. I'm in California, so I actually do plan on either being at Long Beach Comic Con, which is in October, I believe, or LA Comic Con, which is in November, early November, I believe. I'm still finalizing um, which of those two. I don't believe that I'm going to go to both, just because again, it's kind of it's laborious depending on what you're doing. But I would love to be there. And then there are also some little pop up shows that again are on the West Coast and in LA that I'll be at. Like there's actually Cam Fest, which I will be at, which is at the USC Library. They haven't announced the date for that, I don't believe yet, but I'll be at CamFest this year. Um, so again, I'll try to hit. I don't want to say as much as I can. There are some creators that are able to go to 8 cons a year, 9 cons a year. That's not really my style, nor something I want to do. That's a expenditure. It's a heavy expenditure in terms of money, in terms of time, in terms of stress. And for me, because of running the publishing company as well as creating the comics, it would just take me away from what I love doing. I wouldn't be able to write as many comics or edit as many comics or color if I spent, one weekend um, per year, per month at a con. That's a lot of time because you got to still recover from that.
yeah.
So you know,
And you don't know if you're gonna break even or not.
exactly. It's very hard, especially if you're going to the larger ones, right? If you're trying to get into C2E2, if you're trying to get into NY Comic Con, if you're trying to get into San Diego Comic Con, they're expensive, they're
Mhm.
pricey, and you've got to sell everything if you're lucky. Again, to break even, to make sure that you've covered your hotel, your flight, and all that stuff. So exactly 1 or 2, man. It's hard to do more than that sometimes for a certain type of creator. If you have a machine behind you, you can do what you want. But if you don't have
Yeah.
that machine behind you, you're kind of spinning wheels sometimes. If you do that, if you go that way. Um,
Awesome.
but yeah, horror stuff. So I'm a really big Stephen King guy,
Awesome.
and so I used to read Salem's Lot and Needful Things every year.
Mhm.
I read it one time, and I freaked myself out, so I never again. But it is also the not yeah, I want to say the original It with like Tim Curry, the one that was on TV. That's like
Yeah.
that's still one of my favorite horror movies. It's still very hard for me as a 40-year-old man to watch it by myself in the dark, right? Like I don't know if I'm going to do it ever.
Does
Uh,
Tim Curry does such a great job.
he really does. He
I
is
mean,
so creepy.
that's why he's growing up as kids, me and you, because 'cause we're roughly around the same age, that Tim Curry, in Legend as the Devil and all these different creatures, there's just some actors who know how to play the bad guy or the monster so well, and
Right.
I'm not saying the remake didn't wasn't good. I mean, it had some good parts to it, but
Yeah.
Pennywise, when it comes to Tim Curry, is
Yeah.
still the one reason why a lot of kids are afraid of clowns past a
Seriously.
certain, generation.
Seriously. He was so okay. So I think that in the new one was like scary, right? Like I
Mhm.
think he was, they did the jump scares. Skarsgård is an amazing actor, so he was definitely like freaky, you know what I
Oh,
mean?
yes. Mhm.
Scary. Tim Curry, in my opinion, was so aloof and like terrifying. That
Yeah.
was the difference for me. Like the timbre of his voice, the just again, like you said, some people know how to play those things, and I think that Tim Curry is he's a voice gymnast. I don't know if there's even a word like that, right? But he knows how to throw his voice in certain ways and the inflections and all of that stuff that is just, you know what I mean? Like spine tingling. And I also think that they did some very great things, right? Like the hand reaching out of the book. That's a small little practical thing, but it
Yeah.
was creepy. Jesus, it was creepy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
and yeah, that was an amazing, amazing one. I love that. I grew up and I watched Hellraiser way too young. Um,
I think we
just
all did.
like on a number of levels, right? Like the gore, the sex, the like everything about it. Like there was no reason for me at like 12. I don't even think I was 12, but there's no reason for me at 12 to be watching Hellraiser, right?
Mhm.
But that's got a special place in my heart. The original uh, Nightmare on Elm Street has a special place in my heart. I watched that at like 4 years old. And I remember my mom telling me not to, and I snuck and watched it anyway. And I didn't want to sleep for a month, you
Yeah.
know, like, um, uh, what else? Again, I like a lot of Japanese horror, even though again it's super unfair because it's like a curse and
Yeah.
it's like you can't escape it no matter what.
Yeah, I would ask
Um,
what's your favorite horror movie of all time
ooh,
and why?
hmm, that one's a difficult one. Favorite horror movie of all time. God, I mean, I honestly think I would have to go with it, right? Like, even though again I'm a grown man, I'm still terrified of it. So I think that that solidifies it, right? Like I can still watch The Ring, I can
Yeah.
still watch The Grudge, I can still watch a bunch of those, right? And they don't really terrify me still. If I'm watching it, man,
Well,
I'm gonna look over
if
my shoulder,
if
you
you
know?
ever have free time,
Mhm.
besides, like, talking about comics and stuff like that, sometimes our show, we just talk about random topics, like, one time we did a whole show just about werewolves. We did a whole, like, 2-hour anniversary about, Stephen King's I mean, not Stephen King's, we did a whole 2-hour episode of John Carpenter's, The Thing,
Oh
because I
yeah.
love
Ooh,
The Thing is one of my favorite movies of all time.
do we call that
For
horror, or do we call? I
it's
consider that
it's
kind of
sci-fi
science
horror.
fiction, right? Okay, thank you. Okay,
Yeah,
I wasn't doing strict horror with that one,
yeah,
but yeah, it's up there.
yeah, yeah, definitely science fiction, space horror.
Okay.
But yeah, just yeah, so if we ever do a topic just on the original Stephen King's It, you're more than welcome to come back on and just shoot the breeze with us about that
Love
movie.
that. I would love that. That would be dope. Speaking of sci-fi horror, though, I still consider it number one more than number two. But I think Alien is it's got horror aspects to it at least, and I think that
Yes,
that goes
mhm.
pretty high on my list.
The first one definitely has, like, more of the horror elements. The 2, it was more of like a sci-fi action flick,
Action, yeah,
but
yeah,
the first one definitely had, like, the jump scares
yeah,
and just all those different elements that made it into a horror movie.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I think that goes pretty high on my list as well.
Alright, and now for, most people, especially kids at a playground, growing up, it's like, "Oh, my favorite superhero's Iron Man, and mine is Thor, and Thor could kick his butt, and Thor could kick I mean, Iron Man could kick his butt." Do you have a favorite, like, 80s slasher or just a horror movie slasher in general? Like, some people put, Ghostface, some people put Freddy. Just, like, what character really sticks out to you and why?
Hmm.
Mhm.
There was a character. Gosh, I cannot remember the name of this movie. Uh, but it was okay. So it was a guy, right? And it wasn't. I think it was Stephen King again. I think it was Shocker. Um,
Okay, yeah,
they
Shocker, I remember
electrocute
Shocker.
the dude, right? And then he comes back,
Yeah,
and I was like, "Wait a minute, what?"
on the front cover of the movie, he's, like, wearing orange overalls, and he could travel through electricity. Yep.
Yeah, that creeped me out, man. That was, but he was like, okay, it was like really cool though, because I was like, oh man,
Mhm.
he lived, and like you said, he could travel through electricity, so that looked cool, and I always really liked that. But again, it was one of those things that like it creeped me out. But also as a super honorable mention, Jason, but not just all the Jasons, but the Jason where Jason was in New York.
Yes. Mhm.
Jason in New York was like
Jason Goes to Manhattan.
yeah, yeah, he was a special kind of evil, but also kind of hilarious.
Yeah.
So I liked that. That was one of my favorite. I was, and Jason was one of those more than even Michael Myers to me because I one of the things I didn't like about Michael Myers was like, which was part of the point is like you never understood why, right? Like there was
Yeah.
never a reason for him to
Mhm.
have survived some of the things he did. Jason, they gave you that, right? Like
Yeah.
after the second one, they gave you like, oh, this is why he survived, and this is why he's back, and this is why he can do all those things. And so I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. So Jason would have to be you know, my honorable mention, very
Mhm.
close to the top with Shocker,
Yeah. Well, with
80s slasher.
Jason, Goes to Manhattan, one of the best scenes of the whole at least I think it is, one of the best scenes in the whole Friday the 13th, franchise is where the boxer is on the roof
Yes.
punching him, and, like, you could li and the thing is, if you watch the special features,
Mhm.
he's really punching him. He's not holding back those punches,
Wow.
and, like, the guy, Jason, I can't remember who was it. I think it was Kane, Holder at the point,
Mhm.
but they had him wear, like, a padded mask and a
Mhm.
padded suit,
Mhm.
and the guy who played Jason is like, "Even though I had, padded all over my body, I could
Mhm.
still feel the punches, and I had some bruising afterwards."
Jeez. Oh, see, I didn't know that, man. That's actually
It
because that scene is so brutal, and you could see the boxer like legitimately get tired out. Like
Yeah,
when he's tired at the end, he really is
he's
spent.
really throwing the punches, but
Oh, that's dope.
it's one of the best scenes ever because Jason's like, "Okay, this guy wants to fight. I'll let him show me what he has," While other times, Jason is quick to kill someone, but it's like, "No, I wanna play around with this guy," and most of the other people always ran away with him. He's like, "You know what? I have nowhere to go. Imma fight my way out." So,
Mhm.
yeah, great scene,
Yeah. And then he gets his head punched off as well.
right? With one
Like,
punch.
right, right. It was so amazing.
Yeah,
Take your best
and I
shot, and his best shot was
right?
amazing.
Yeah, I know they have Friday the 13th video game that I played years ago, and
Mhm.
you could kill someone like that, so I had to do that all the time.
Nice. Yeah, I remember we played it a couple times. I
Yeah.
never got to actually play as Jason, but yeah, I was like, man, running away from this guy really is really difficult. Like,
Yeah.
How is this
Right,
fair?
right.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah. So, you know, you named a lot of movies that you like and everything, but is there one movie that you would never watch just because you think it's like the concept is nasty? Because, there's horror movies that people refuse to, watch just because of the grotesqueness of it.
Um, I have kind of two, I guess. I'm not a hostile fan. I don't like the torture porn aspects of it. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? Of like,
Yeah.
it's not my genre. Other people like it, and that's cool. It's just not me.
Mhm.
And Human Centipede.
Same here. Same here. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm like, a good movie doesn't need like if it's a horror movie where you're at more times almost coming close to throwing up instead of getting scared, then you're losing the whole point of a horror movie.
Yeah, yeah. I'm definitely like a not like a strict horror guy, but I feel
Mhm.
like there's a difference between horror and gore.
Yeah, I
Um,
definitely agree,
and
especially with
even
today.
yeah, what's the one with Jigsaw?
Yeah, Saw?
Saw, right? I
Yeah,
think Saw started one way as like a psychological horror kind of thing,
especially the first
and
movie.
yeah, yeah, and then I think it delved into that kind of torture porn kind of territory. So I mean, like
Mhm,
I enjoyed the first one, I enjoyed the second one, and I kind of after that I didn't care for it anymore.
gotcha. And I don't know if you have any injustice or stuff like that, but, like, if you had to write or draw gore in a horror aspect, do you feel that you're not afraid to go too far for the audience, or it's like, "Okay, I'm not gonna go and write this like these movies do?"
I think you can be visually descriptive and
Mhm.
even like I feel like you can be descriptive enough without having to go over the edge. So like we talked about briefly like Hellraiser, right?
Yeah.
Um and I mean like the original. So there's a scene in the original, and I'm actually rubbing my hand right now because I'm remembering the scene where the guy rips his the back of his hand on a nail. It
Yes.
was it's visceral, it's, like, kind of gory, and it's
Mhm.
shocking, but, like, I feel like that did enough, and I feel like if they did that exact scene, if you have someone like the director of Saw, one of the directors of Saw, or you know what I mean, those kind of guys, I feel like they would do more with it, which would be unnecessary, right? Like, I
Yeah.
feel like if you get that point where people are, like, uncomfortable, where they touch themselves where the damage is happening,
Mhm.
because they're feeling that emotion, I feel like that's enough without sometimes less is more. Sometimes you don't have to say anything you don't have to say everything
Yeah.
for it to be understood.
Mhm.
There is a scene, honestly, there's a scene upcoming in, it's not going to be in Justice necessarily, but there's a scene coming in the Wingless Comics universe where in Justice issue one half, Justice faces a demon and he faces a person who is being protected by said demon, and the person is he's a pedophile, he's a child abuser. Um,
Okay, gotcha.
and I wanted to make a point about abuse and on and on and on.
Mhm.
So we end up in another comic that's going to come out in the future, in the very near future. We end up going back to that location. So obviously, justice has defeated these two entities, and when we see the human is being feasted on by other demons.
Gotcha.
So I feel like there is a way, and I've described it a certain way, to show that, right? To show that there's a feast of flesh
Mhm.
without necessarily being gory. I feel like there are a lot of things that you can do without being over the top.
Yeah.
And you can set the mode and the mood of that horror and that visceral reaction and all these kind of horrific things again without just over. I don't think you have to do
Well,
everything.
it's like even with crime stories, like, okay, you have a crime story where this woman lived through being raped. You don't have to go into, like, very deep detail to talk
Yeah,
about it, you know?
yeah, 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 yeah. Again, sometimes, and I think Stephen King said this. Sometimes, like letting people's imagination run with whatever you said is worse than if you try to tell them or show them yourself. Like people's
Exactly.
imaginations are more terrifying than what anything you could describe. Um,
And as a storyteller, sometimes you have to let the imagination play instead of just drawing out like a 30-minute scene, you know?
mhm, mhm. I see. Okay, so I also see that duality in like romantic things, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes as I get older, like you'll see a sex scene in a movie. Okay, cool, who
Yeah.
cares? But at the same time, it's like, well, you didn't actually need that. Like this didn't tell the story at all. If you had done the
Mhm.
same thing and the lights go out and then they come back up and they're in bed together, we know what happened. There's
Yeah.
nothing that that particular scene added to your storytelling.
Mhm.
And so the same goes for horror. The same goes for action. The same goes for any. Sometimes you're not telling any part of the story. You just have it in there, and it's like, well, I mean, we could have skipped this and got to the next narrative piece.
Yeah, for sure. And let's see. So, I don't know if you're ever a horror fan when it comes to the old school, but if you had like your top favorite out of the Universal monsters, who would be your favorite and why?
Wait, just the monster or the movie? Because that's there's a difference.
Like the characters. Like the
Okay,
characters.
bro, I don't think you beat Dracula. I don't think you beat Bela
Gotcha.
Lugosi as Dracula, right? Like that first line
Mhm.
where he's like, "I bid you welcome." That is so spine tingling, right? And I think again, the older I get, the more I realize how terrifying that is. A
Yeah.
vampire, and we know it now, right? He's inviting you in as opposed to him coming to your door trying to be invited in.
Mhm.
It's terrifying, man. The way they lit his eyes to where it was just a spotlight right on his eyes, like all the little aspects of it um, were amazing. But Boris Karloff as Frankenstein in the original Frankenstein is also amazing. Um, Basil Rathbone as Dr. Frankenstein. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I have a huge affinity for the Universal monsters.
Mhm.
Obviously, because they started a whole genre of movies and storytelling. But but yeah, Dracula is the tops for me as far as that goes. Again, you don't beat Boris Karloff in his multitude of performances though
Yeah, for sure.
as well.
Awesome.
Also, really quick shout out to, even though it's not one of the Universal Monsters series technically, I love uh, the Mummy with Brendan Fraser. I love that series,
Oh, yeah.
and I also
That
love Van
series is
Helsing.
so that's yeah, those series and that movie, yeah,
Yeah,
just
the Mummy
like a
and the
lot of
Mummy Returns are amazing action adventure set pieces,
mhm,
right? Like they are the perfect, not sequel, but like spiritual sequels to like your Indiana Jones,
mhm,
and those big kind of action serials and adventure serial movies. Um, and then, moving into, you know, Van Helsing, because it's the same director, Steve Summers, the same director. Like he really understood the Universal monsters. He did one of those old Universal crossovers. Dracula meets the werewolf meets Frankenstein. Like it really
yeah,
was like epic and that kind of great and done in that
and that's
form. And I love
and
those.
and that's what I like about Frankenstein's monster the most because it's more of a tragedy instead of a horror movie. Like,
Mhm.
this person's made up of different body parts, like, if this person is playing the piano, do they know how to play the piano or the person's hands that they have, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah,
You don't know who you really are. And
yeah.
then even, with Van Helsing, with the Monster Squad, with the kids
Yeah, I
versus
love
the
it.
Universal Monsters,
Mhm.
Frankenstein has always been depicted as the good guy in the end who's just hanging out with the wrong crowd.
Mhm. Mhm. I love the fact that we get the chance to like of all of the universal monsters, even
Mhm.
though some of them used to be human. Frankenstein is the most human at all times,
Yeah.
even more human than Dr. Frankenstein, right? Like
Yeah.
Frankenstein's monster is the one that actually understands empathy and humanity, even
Mhm.
though in certain aspects he doesn't know how to like explain it or talk about it, or you know what I mean, or
Yeah,
communicate it, but he's that being, which is really dope.
for sure. Awesome.
Also, Monster Squad, great pick. Love Monster Squad.
Yeah.
Amazing, amazing movie. I
Oh,
definitely
for
I
sure.
saw Monster Squad in the theater as a kid. So like after that, we were the Monster Squad for like the next month, hunting nothing, but still doing it every day.
Yeah, right. Wolfman's got nards. Yeah.
Right. Best line.
Right.
Yeah.
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 Well, we're past the 1 hour mark, but it's been really fun to have you on. And like I said, if you ever need more to promote or, if you have free time and you want to come on the show, like, hey, can I come on the show sometime? And like I said, we could just talk about Stephen King's the 90s with Tim Curry, because that we could easily talk in a whole hour about that.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Like I said, I really appreciate it. I'm sorry, Jason couldn't be here to co-host, but I'm super glad that we got to have this conversation because it's really good to get to know you and what I mean, just again chop up a couple different things about horror and storytelling and this crazy world of comics. So I really, really appreciate you allowing me to come on here.
No problem. Definitely after the show, we'll talk more about the supernatural stuff, because
Definitely.
definitely me and you could relate to our stories on different levels. So yeah.
Awesome, awesome.
All right. Well, thank you, Gary, for stopping by. Thank you, anybody who's going to watch on the afterplay. You all have a great weekend.